In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the collet nut on a Weed Eater RTE 113C string trimmer. First, I'll remove one side of the handle set. It's secured with 4 screws. Now I can remove the trigger. Now I'll remove the switch. I'll pull it away from the housing and use a pair of needle nose pliers to remove the wires. Now I'll remove the spool and just simply pull straight out of the trimmer. Now I'll remove the spool retainer. It's held in place with a couple of metal tabs. You can push those tabs through from the outside of the spindle and then pull the retainer out of the spindle. Now I can remove the return spring. Now I'll remove the guard. The guard's secured with a couple of plastic tabs. You'll need to carefully bend these up and out of the way. And then the guard rotates off of the housing. Now I can remove one half of the motor housing set. It's secured with 6 screws. There also might be a decal between the 2 halves of the housing. If there is, you'll want to slice that with a knife. Now I can remove the push button. Now I'll remove the motor and hub from the housing and disconnect the wires. Now I'll remove the snap button. Now I can remove the wiring harness from the tube. Now I'll remove the collet nut and the lower tube. Now I can reinstall the collet nut onto the upper tube and slide the lower tube onto the upper tube. Now I can install the wiring harness back into the tube. I'll start at the upper end of the tube and feed the harness through. Now I'll reinstall the snap button. Now I'll replace the motor and hub assembly. First, I'll reconnect the wires, and then place the motor and hub assembly back into the housing. Now I'll replace the push button. Now I can go ahead and replace the other half of the motor housing assembly. Before I do that though, I want to take a minute and make sure I have all the wires out of the way, so when I put the 2 halves together, they don't get pinched. You'll notice that there's some little slots in the motor housing, and those are for the wires to be pressed down into. And then I'll secure the housing with the screws. Now I can reinstall the switch. First I'll slide the wires back onto the terminals on the switch. and then place the switch back in the housing. Now replace the trigger. Now replace the other half of the handle set and secure it with the screws. Now I can replace the shield assembly. I slide it over the spool and then line up the slots and tabs on the trimmer. Then it just twists into place. Now I'll replace the return spring. Now I can replace the spool retainer. I'll slide it into the shaft, then use a pair of pliers to squeeze the two metal tabs together. Then continue to push it down into the shaft. Now I'll replace the spool. I'll thread the trimmer line through the eyelet in the outer part of the trimmer head, and then the spool just snaps in place.